This is the emergency podcast system. This is not a test. Movies are bombing all over the country. They are posing as movies you already know. They may already be in your theaters, your neighbor's home, or even your own. Do not panic. Specialists have been dispatched. They will help you identify these pretenders and defend you against this invasion of the remake. Please stand by for further instructions.
Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I am your host, Jason Bishop, and with me, as always, is Trish Coughlin. Oh, everybody's going to do that today. And Jeff Omega.
Meow.
Maximum effort on that one.
You need to get your cat now.
He literally has a cat.
Yeah.
He could have just stepped on the tail and it would have worked.
I have three cats.
3 cats.
They're all on the other side of the house.
Yeah, because they knew this was coming.
Yes.
All right, today we're going to be talking about Ju-on the Grudge versus the Grudge from 2004, and we're going to be talking about the 2020 release as well, because I was under the impression it was a remake, but it's not.
No.
It is, I want to call it a sidequel? Yeah, it's a sidequel.
It's a rogue. What's the one that the Star Wars one that was a side one?
Yeah,
Like
well,
Rogue One.
One.
Like a Star
Rogue
Wars
One.
story.
Yeah, it actually takes place like concurrently with the first Sarah Michelle Gellar. So it is worth talking about, and in general I figure we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff about The Grudge, because the 2002 itself, the Sarah Michelle Gellar, is a remake of the 2002, which is a remake of the 2000s direct-to-video stuff, as well as some short films. The Grudge has had a long history. It began with a few short films that were part of a horror anthology in Japan, and then those wound up getting some acclaim, so were made into some direct-to-video features. They're still fairly short, but by feature standards, but it was enough to get noticed and say, hey, you know, let's make this better and do it for the big screen instead of doing it on the cheap with this crappy video stuff. So they went and made a really good one for the theatrical version, and that's what we're going to concentrate on, is the theatrical 2002 Ju-on the Grudge, and the Sarah Michelle Gellar 2004 remake, produced by Sam Raimi, and we will talk about the 2020 as well. And guess what? There is a Ju-on Origins series currently airing on Netflix, just started a few weeks ago, so maybe go check that out as well. Netflix, sponsor us.
It would be awesome, please.
Well,
God knows
what I
we send
found out-
enough traffic to them.
Yeah.
You know what I also found out this morning is Ju-on itself has also been remade in Japan as Ju-on the Beginning of the End. And that is a remake made by different people of the Japanese Ju-on, the Grudge. And yeah, so this whole series is just full of remakes and retcons and different versions and twists.
And I did the extra credit work because I remember watching Kayako, Sadako versus Kayako. And it's Grudge versus Ring.
I haven't seen it, but I'd like to. I did see a little weird Japanese baseball video. You can catch it on YouTube, where Sadako, they run some ring stuff on the big screen, and then Sadako runs out to toss the ball, and coming out to bat is Kayako from The Grudge, and even sitting on the sidelines is a little cat boy.
Nice.
So I was greatly amused by that. So that was part of my extra credit. But I watched The Grudge 2 as well, because there's a segment with 3 students, girls from the Ju-on movie that was omitted from the first Grudge movie, but became one of the central stories within Grudge 2. So I did wind up watching The Grudge 2.
So those 3 girls so you're saying the Grudge 2 with 3 girls, is that outside of the 3 who went missing and like Izumi left?
Yeah, well, there
really
was,
early on.
well, if you remember from the original films, there were some girls that already were missing.
Yes.
So those 3 girls, because of that myth, kind of went to the place, and then one of them being the daughter of the detective.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I was under the impression initially that they were seeing posters of themselves. But, my little TV, I couldn't quite tell. So, do I need to zoom in on the poster? I felt like I was missing something, or I was just reading too deep.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was basically a similar hazing. They just allowed it, in the American one, they allowed some of these stories to have a little more time, and there is this disconnected, non-linear way of telling the story that's standard throughout the film series in Japan and North America as well. I came over with the American version because Takahashi Shimizu, who created Ju-on, did wind up remaking the film in America as The Grudge with Sarah Michelle Gellar. Pretty accurate, and he wound up being able to fix things or spend more time with things that he wanted to in the first one. He seems to be this guy who likes to come in and dick around with his creation over and over again, so I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, I think most people would be okay with that, unless they're George Lucas, in which case everybody shits on the poor bastard.
Well, it's sort of, I think Takashi is more open to people giving him like notes. I think that's the problem with the George Lucas thing. He's out of control and nobody's saying no. But I think Takashi still got some no's, so it really worked out well.
He still had American writer to help him smooth it out for an American audience because he doesn't speak a lick of English. So that film could have been a disaster because of the set with English actors and stuff. But, it sounded like they worked out just fine with the translators on set, and clearly it was a hit because it spawned an American franchise as well that is continuing on to this day. We can say all thanks to The Ring having success here. It brought J-horror into America. Mm-hmm. And we did cover The Ring, so go check that out. It was a long time ago, and it's kind of nice to return to some J-horror stuff.
Yes.
One of the benefits to having an American write the screenplay of the remakes as well is it's all about sensibilities, which is something that people don't talk about as much. But there's a lot of things that are cultural in a movie that's made for a Japanese audience that may or may not translate over to English audiences and vice versa. Yeah, that would be the huge benefit to him still directing, but from an American script, is it would still have those considerations because it's being made for Westerners.
Yeah, they were very wise in the remake to keep the setting in Japan because, a Japanese haunting is very different from what a Western haunting is like. Like, you watch a haunted house movie. Here, it is, we've discovered the haunting, we research it, we solve the problem, right? That's kind of how it is. And the ghosts, they can do stuff, but don't tend to physically harm anybody. It's more of a, we'll scare the shit out of you kind of thing. Yeah. And Japanese horror movie, they discover the haunting, they research it, and then the haunting goes, fuck off, I'm bigger than you aren't solving this. And we can kick the shit out of you while we're doing it. So, a very different sensibility. The ghosts, they have different levels of ghosts, and you can go online and research this. This one's more of a hostile Ozaku? I'm trying to remember. I was trying to remember it last night and keep it in my head, and then, of course, come to podcast and I don't remember it. Ozaki or something like that. And yeah, violent spirits. And this Grudge literally is a tragedy that is trapped in a space and it reoccurs. And anybody who crosses into that space and interacts with those ghosts gets caught up in that curse that is in that space and can spread it too.
Yeah, that was the one thing. Like, it's sort of Western movies, the ghosts are generally sort of trapped in their area, and it's sort of like, oh well, this house is haunted, we can just leave. But in like the J-horror, no, the curse comes with you. Like, the haunting, you can't escape the haunting, which is just so much more terrifying.
Unlike The Ring kind of, as it ages, becomes less viable because of its format. It's transmitted through the videotape, and they did try to solve that a little bit with rings, but essentially the technology going away kind of killed the ghost, right? and makes it less viable as a story, whereas this one kind of can perpetuate by the people who cross into the space. And no wonder that they wanted to burn the fucking house down.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's also like It Follows, where it's like they say it's the STD allegory. You're infected with the curse, and you keep it with you.
Yeah. Okay, well, you know what? Let's take a look at the first trailer. I did find an English translated one, so it'll be at least easier to go through. The 2004 doesn't have a lot of audio in it, so it'll make up for it.
From the creators of the international award-winning sensation, Ringu. There is a curse, born of a powerful rage. It gathers in the places where the dead once lived. And if you cross its path, you die. But now, one survivor will learn the truth. About a brutal murder, a missing child, and the chain that can't be broken. The Grudge. Look into the eyes of evil.
And we're back. That was the original film from 2002, Ju-on the Grudge, written and directed by Takahashi Shimizu, who also did Rin, which isn't well known here, but has been a Japanese manga that I was familiar with, and is a fairly prominent horror movie in Japan as well. Starring Megumi Okina as Rika, and she was in Shudder, which we'll probably do someday because it's been remade. Misaki Ho was Hitomi. Misa Uhara. I'm doing all right with these Japanese names. It was Izumi. Yu Ichikawa was Chihani. Takeko Fuji was Kayako, which is the ghost, the lead ghost in this. And her son was Yuya Ozaki as Toshio. And both of those actors do return for the American version as well. Chikeko Isumura was Sachi. Kanji Suda was Katsuyo. Shuri Matsuda was Kazumi. Takahashi Matsuyama was Takio. Aki Fuji was Yoko. Yoji Tanaka was Yuji. All right, I got through it all.
Woohoo!
Japanese I'm okay with.
Oh, Japanese. That was the one thing. Every time I watch a J-horror, like if I watch a Stephen King one, that's keeping me out of Maine. I'm not going near it. But when I watch a Japanese horror, I'm like, ooh, I should go to Japan. It makes, I just want to go there and see it.
Well, that's how they attracted the American cast, was like, oh, we get to shoot in Japan? Fuck yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't blame them. I'd love to go do that too. Now, they actually shot in a real house there, unlike the one in the American one, which was a set that they build in two spots. So the first set was the main floor with stairs that going up, so you can actually have a second level. But the ceiling, roof level, the attic, was actually a separate set aside. So when somebody's going up, you can still shoot them going into the attic, and then they can shoot the rest on another set. I mean, it was much larger because that's something that American audience are used to, but even when I watched the original Ju-on, I'm going, oh, that's a pretty big house, which it wasn't. Yeah. It was an actual house, which actually was just demolished last year in Japan, so it was a big tourist attraction until just last year, so another thing to hate 2020 for. Yeah. I'm like, damn it, the Grudge house is gone. Or somebody just wanted the Grudge to end.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe this is just a whole thing. Maybe it was a documentary and we just don't know it.
Maybe.
That's one thing I was thinking after watching The Grudge 2020 is probably that will be the end of the American Grudge series, because for the foreseeable future, you're not going to have Americans traveling to Japan.
Oh, that is true, but the majority of that film actually happens on American soil. They were very clever in a way how to bring that over and create their own curse. A similar family tragedy happens because of Kayako. It spreads the curse to another family. The curse itself is really interesting because if it's an individual, Kayako just comes at you, might mess with you a little bit before finally taking you out. And if it's a family, she influences them in such a way where it reoccurs, and that is a theory about ghosts, and at least within the Grudge, is that they are reliving their tragedy, and the tragedy being Kayako was obsessed with this teacher and total stalker, so she wasn't right in the head in the first place. And her husband thought she was cheating on him, and it was love from afar kind of stalkering. There was no cheating actually happening, but she was emotionally elsewhere, and he found the photos and everything else, and he freaked out, broke her neck, broke her ankle, killed her, and then drowned the son and the cat in the tub of the house. That's why the cat and the son are bound together in this kind of cat demon boy thing. So I always wrote in my notes, I'm like, cat boy.
Cat boy.
Cat boy.
Well, it's nice to have a pet if you're going to be haunting somewhere.
Yeah, and
your cat's there.
Yeah, and then he was hung himself. Now, depends on the lore with the father there. I've read a couple of different things that Kayako wound up strangling him with her hair and ripped off his jaw, which is why that comes back later with the jaw. But I don't know. It just could be material I haven't seen. Now, I think, Jeff, you watched the original 2000, didn't you, for extra credit?
I was going to, actually.
I thought you
but
did.
it was very late by the time I got to it.
Oh, okay.
But one thing that is kind of interesting is essentially when he was in film school, the director of Ju-on the Grudge,
Takashi Shimizu.
Yeah, thank you, Taki Shimizu. When he was in film school, one of his teachers was Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who directed Cure and Seance. Mm-hmm. And those movies are pretty all right. And one thing that's interesting about them is kind of his approach to storytelling in kind of a investigative kind of style. Kind of seeing that made a lot of sense about some of the sensibilities of Ju-on. But basically, he really loved the short films that he made. And, J Cinema was really popular and straight to DVD stuff. So that's basically what the Ju-on the Curse is. And then Ju-on the Curse 2 is essentially Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where it's half of it is reassembled footage from the first movie with a half an hour tacked on that's original footage at the end. But then Ju-on the Grudge is like a remake of Ju-on the Curse, but for the big screen. So the original one was straight to DVD, and then he basically got to make it again on a bigger budget. So yeah, that's basically what the Grudge was versus the Curse, from what I was able to read. They're pretty similar.
Now, I didn't do much reading on the shorts, but what was 10-4s?
So I've seen both of them, and I can't remember which one is which in terms of titles. Which is the other one?
I don't remember the title of the other one. 10-4s was easy to remember because it's just a lot of fours.
Basically, one of them is a woman sitting on a bench, and she hears cats, and she like looks around, and there's a ghost boy, right? And it's the ghost boy like making sounds, and he's getting closer to her, and that's kind of it's like the short. Okay. And then the other one is kind of like, can't remember which scene it is, but it is in Ju-on the Grudge. It's a scene with Kayako doing something Kayako-ish. It might have been her crawling down the stairs. It's been several years. The last time I watched them was the first time I watched The American Grudge, and this was the second time, yesterday.
Right. Yeah, the first time I saw it in the theater with a friend, and we really loved it the first time. I didn't feel that way this go-round, to be honest. Not sure why. Maybe it's because Shimizu likes to keep his ghosts. He doesn't hide them in the shadows. Like, there they are. We're going to show it you right on, full lit. There it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or maybe just I'm a hardened film guy at this point, and it's not. I didn't get the same creep factor out of it. I mean, I always liked when the shower scene with the hand coming out of the hair. The original film, it's actually Kayako from the other side and just holding her head, but every other version, it's the hands coming out of the hair. And
Yeah.
I thought that's really cool. And it's all shot practically, too. So it's just somebody had to get in there and push their hand out. But it looks great. And you get somebody like Takeko Fuji doing this, and she's a wicked contortionist. It's like doing stuff you didn't think a human body could do. Like when she's crawling down the stairs, there's no effects there. That is all her.
Yes.
Ju-on, I don't think, has any digital effects. The Grudge is very minimal and certainly hard to spot.
You know, I think that the Grudge, the remake, the American one, it really suffers watching it immediately after Ju-on the Grudge. Because I think that Ju-on the Grudge, after watching, so I've watched Ju-on the Grudge, then the American Grudge, Grudge 2, Grudge 3, Grudge 2020, because Grudge 2020 ties into the other ones. But out of all of those, Ju-on the Grudge is my favorite. But part of that is it's a little bit less polished, and that kind of adds to some of the horror. And then immediately watching the American Grudge afterwards, some of it is the same scares, which have less impact if you've just seen them. And it's also a little bit more polished than before, which kind of loses a little bit of the atmosphere that the first one had. But I do think that if you're watching The Grudge separately, it does stand alone pretty well as a movie, but not right after you've seen Ju-on the Grudge.
I think I'd agree with most of that. Like, you only get one time to watch a movie for the first time, right? And after that, you kind of know the beats and stuff. And so that's probably why it just didn't have the same effect for me this go around. Like, I don't think it's as solid as a franchise as The Ring is, as far as creativity and creating just this overwhelming dread, but it's still a very entertaining idea. The two, specifically the 2004 and the 2002, are very close because it's the same director with the same vision. So he's only tweaking things. I do find I think I like the original one just a little bit more than the American one, but he was smart enough to give the main character of Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, Karen, more time. And I think because of that, there's a more emotional punch to her character and her story.
I do think that Ju-on the Grudge, the last half an hour, has, in terms of succession and scares and moving forward the movie, like when she goes to have lunch with her friend and the Catboy's under the table, and there's all of this stuff where you're like, how can he make a lunch in a crowded diner in daylight scary or something? And then it's just like 4 or 5 different scare scenes that are a couple minutes long each, all added up. I think all the scares were really effective in that way, building up towards the end of Ju-on the Grudge. That really made the ending more scary.
I think dropping the girls did benefit the American one somewhat by giving some more space to these other characters. I did feel like there was they tried to pack too much in, and it just felt like a bunch of short films by the end of it. So,
well, it was like chapters. This is the chapter of this person. This is the chapter of this person.
Which made it a little easier to follow by giving the chapters, because even with the non-linear, you're jumping back and forward in time to the present and then back to the past, etc. So it's jumping around, where the American one doesn't lead you with those chapter cards. So you kind of have to be paying attention to those jumps, because often you're seeing an end game before you're seeing the beginning of the story.
And
so
what they did, which I thought was kind of cool, because it's sort of actually, this is a good partner episode to our previous episode, where you have like timelines sort of merging together, because you have like the Bill Pullman character seeing Sarah, like he feels Sarah Michelle Gellar is there. Like it's like he's in the past and she's the ghost, which is a very interesting kind of thought. And I think that gave it a little bit more, where it's like this thing doesn't exist in time, and it's going to continue to do so.
Yeah, and that comes to play really effectively in The Grudge 2, where Sarah Michelle Gellar's sister kind of takes the lead role, because, let's face it, Sarah Michelle Gellar, she may have survived the first film, but at the end of the day, Kayako's going to get you. She falls off top of the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah. But at the end of that film, you're seeing, and this happens a couple of times where in these films, where a character steps into the past and she's seeing it. It's not just research anymore. She is experiencing that moment in time. So she basically stepped into Kayako when she got murdered. So she's being murdered by the husband and the little boys at the top of the stairs witnessing all this, and the same thing happens to her. So you see her ankle get broken and her neck gets snapped, and which is incidentally where the gurgling comes from. She's still alive, trying to breathe.
That explains a lot. I was wondering about that, but that makes sense.
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of implied in Ju-on the Grudge, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think they make it a little bit more like obvious in Grudge 2, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they don't really show it concrete enough to you in either Ju-on or The Grudge. But The Grudge 2, yeah, there it is. Oh, that's why she sounds that way. It's definitely implied, and if you can make those assumptions.
There was one thing I wanted to ask, because this is the weirdest thought that occurred to me when I was watching the first Grudge. The sister, Hitomi, when she goes home and she's got an apartment in Tokyo, and I kept wondering, like, does Japanese film and television do the same kind of like Friends thing, where there's no way in hell they could afford that apartment, but they just have it? Because like it's a very nice apartment, and I don't know what Hitomi does.
I mean, probably somebody writing it is just saying, I want to have my movie take place in Japan. I don't know. They have an apartment there, sure.
Or the fact that they could have, even in the original film, a house that size probably meant they were fairly well off.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One thing I think, and I haven't really read into this at all, it's just a thought I was having while we were talking. But so with with Ju-on the Grudge, that would be because it's his first movie for theaters that has a very wide release. There's a lot of that movie that has a lot of aspects of all of his favorite moments from his career up till that point presented within a movie on a wider scale. But on the flip side, with the American Grudge, with the American screenwriter, I imagine that's more a fan of the Japanese Grudge picking out all of their favorite things about his Grudge and then tying those together. And so it's from a different lens a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like it's director's favorites versus, an American audience
I would
writer.
Guess that Sam Raimi, even though he has no writing credit, was fairly instrumental in picking out those things to keep, because he was a big fan and very instrumental in bringing The Grudge over. So he loved it so much that he wanted Americans to see it. This is key in why foreign films get remade in English, is because an English audience is less likely to watch a foreign film in a foreign language. So I do understand when those things happen, and to mixed degrees. We've covered that on the show in foreign language films in the past, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because they sometimes lose the plot. And part of the failure sometimes is there is a sensibility that needs to be adjusted for American audiences, and by keeping it in Japan, your expectation of what a haunted film is can be adjusted in your head, because it's not happening in the States of what you would normally expect from a haunted house film. It was wise to keep it that way, I think.
And it also has, because you're in Japan, you're surrounded by like that society that would be the original part of that epic thing. So whereas you have Nakagawa, a Detective Nakagawa, who sort of believes in the curse, you wouldn't really have that in an American film most of the time. Like, it's sort of, because he is Japanese, it makes more sense, and you can be more invested in the idea that that's what's happening.
I didn't care for the fact that his partners and the other investigators' deaths were all kind of happened off screen in both films.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, more kills. But I mean, they were PG, unlike the 2020.
Oh my God, yeah.
That one was gory. I was on board for that. By that point, I was like, all right, I've seen the same story twice now, and enough of this mamby-pamby bullshit. And when I saw that one, it reinvigorated me.
Oh, man. That's really funny. You can talk about it.
I don't mind a good kill. I don't mind some splatter. Especially Lin Shaye when she cuts off her own fingers. That was gross. Yeah. That was cool, but gross. There was definitely some stuff that was, I'm like, all right, now they're doing some stuff that's getting under my skin a little bit. But it was a movie I was seeing for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, well, let's go to the 2004 trailer, and we'll do some more direct comparisons here.
Your first visit alone. Just make sure she has what she needs and help out around the house.
It is said in Japan that when a person dies in extreme sorrow or rage, death becomes a part of that place, killing everything.
I've been in that house. So have you.
Em and I were alone in that room. I think there was something else there with us.
The Grudge, 2004. The screenplay was adapted by Steven Susko, who wrote Texas Chainsaw 3D. Again, directed by Takahashi Shimizu. Starring Sarah Michelle Gellar of Buffy fame as Karen, Jason Behr as Doug. Jason Behr, most famous for being on Roswell, and his career has gone so well, he's back on Roswell again.
The whole time, actually a couple times during the film, I'm like going, just use your Roswell powers. What's wrong with you?
I know. I was feeling the same way. Clea Duvall was Jennifer. She was on American Horror Story, and I remember her from The Faculty as well, another great horror movie. She even did an episode of Buffy, even though Sarah Michelle Gellar didn't remember her, because her character was invisible, so they never actually shared any screen time. So that's why Sarah never remembered her being on the show.
And they don't hear either.
Yeah. They do. Yeah, they're right. They don't hear either because they're different time frames. William Mapother was Matthew, and he's probably most famous for his stint on Lost. Katie Strickland was Susan, best known for Anacondas. Maybe. I don't know. But she met her husband, her future husband, Jason Behr, on this set, despite the fact they never have any scenes together.
Nice.
Yeah, both being fans of Japanese, just Japan in general, and that's one of the reasons they did this movie, is because they wanted to go to Japan, and they both fell in love with Japan and each other here.
Aw, that's awesome.
That is a good story. Grace Zabiskie was Emma, best known for being on Twin Peaks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bill Pullman is Peter, and he's the teacher we were talking about earlier. Obviously, Independence Day, but he would go on to spoof this very role in Scary Movie 4.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Which was more of a spoof of The Grudge, Scary Movie 4. So, because I think the first one was The Ring. They were kind of patterning off the first Scary Movie. I don't really remember which movies
No,
they
the
were.
first Scary Movie was Scream.
Was it Scream? Oh, yeah, it would be Scream.
And then the 2 was the Haunted Mansion remake.
So 3 would have been The Ring. Okay. I do remember seeing at least the first 3.
Yeah, and then they do Paranormal Activity at some point. I don't know. I fell off the grid with that a while back.
Yeah. Rosa Blassie was Maria. Ted Raimi, a staple of any Raimi movie. We've actually talked about, because he was in Evil Dead, which was episode 9 for us. We talked about Evil Dead and the very gory remake. Ryo Ishibashi was Nakagawa, the detective, and he was in another legendary Japanese movie that thankfully has not been remade in America, so maybe we'll do it one day, but Audition.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen Audition. I don't know. I've heard so much. I don't know what to think.
I'd say right now, if you haven't heard anything about it, go check it out. And don't look it up.
Yeah,
but I'd say if you've heard a lot about it, then stay away. It will not live up to the hype. It's a movie that really, it benefits from you hearing nothing about it and not knowing anything about it.
It's a lovely romantic comedy.
See, I've heard some gross stuff that I just don't want to see.
Oh, we've already seen worse than that.
I know, but there's some things like there's stuff here.
Romantic comedy.
Okay.
I know how you hate romantic comedies. They're more disgusting than anything in these movies, right? Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing: these Grudge movies, it did really stick into like a huge kind of gross out phobia of mine, which is like just hair and hair in drains and wet hair and gross hair that's not attached to you. There's a lot of triggering moments in The Grudge for me, but it's all about wet hair that's not in someone's head.
Hair is big in J-horror in general.
I know.
And I think that I actually saw something about that. That actually does tie back to an older, like 70s movie, samurai movie with a demon, and it's kind of got the long black hair. And Yoko Maki played the very similarly named Yoko in this movie, and she had a bit part in Tokyo Drift, a Fast and Furious movie. I mean, hey, why not? Yuya Ozaki was Toshio, which of course was the original Catboy from Ju-on, and of course Takeko Fuji returned as Kayako in this movie. There's some stuff right there. They're very, they've even retained some of the original cast from the original film, so that's kind of cool.
Thinking about it, I feel like basically what happens sometimes is you take a really great Japanese horror movie and you want to make it for American audiences, and so you basically take away all of the elements that you think you can take away without taking away too much of the identity of the original movie. And what happens with The Grudge is they took away a bunch, but it turns out you can't really take away the location, the ghosts played by specific actors, and all of these very specific things that do carry across, including the director. There's just all of these elements where those are the ones that really worked, and you couldn't really change them more than that without taking away from the flavor of the original.
Mm-hmm. You can really see the growth of him as a filmmaker between these two. We're shooting fairly still low budget in that original film, which was $3.5 million, and he's shooting on location. It's not like he can fly out a wall to move a camera in there, unlike the American remake where it's on sets and they can do better camera movements by flying out walls, and benefit of it being a set, right? So you can get better shots. Even the American one was a fairly minimal budget of $10 million.
Yeah, but I mean, you get that kind of one set. You do some exteriors, but when you have just one set, I mean...
He must have been really happy. I'm like, oh my God, this is like 3 times what I got to work with.
Yeah, probably.
That's still like anybody else. They only gave you $10 million.
Oh yeah, but like when you haven't had $10 million, it seems like an amazing amount of money.
Hey, and it went on to make 180 and change. So 180 million and change off of 10 million. Everybody was extremely happy.
Yes. And you know what? I will say, out of all of the American J-horror remakes, like, it actually holds up probably better than a lot of the other ones do.
Well, I think a J-horror, The Ring still holds up well, the original American one. Sequel, not so much. I did find this one, like I said, the Grudge kind of loses something as you've seen it, and you don't really need to go back to it again, unless you've spaced it too far apart, because... cleverly, all the sequels kind of tie in and weave in nicely because of that split narrative. There's lots of spaces as people cross paths with other people, or they cross into the house. Realtors get hit, and the investigating officers aren't safe, and the next tenants in the house get affected, and the woman with dementia had home care as well. So that care worker, which was Rika in the original film, and Rika, that's kind of the Karen role in the remake, the Sarah Michelle Gellar role, although she's kind of an amalgam of a few more characters as well. But primarily Rika, she's taken over that spot, and it's work experiences while she's in Japan, learning the language and whatnot with her boyfriend. The boyfriend's a new character, Doug, just somebody new to kill.
Yeah.
But gives them an opportunity to reinstate the jealousy angle from the original murder. Not that it plays very much.
No, it doesn't. Like, I mean, their relationship's doing pretty good overall.
Yeah, there was a little bit more that got cut.
Yeah, but it's like, it's a good way to get her back to the house, of all things, is when he's going there to just check it out. And she decides to come save him. Because I wouldn't go back there after a bunch of shit that I saw. Yeah,
well, I mean, Karen... or Rika both witnessed this murder in this house, basically, of this old lady who she's checking in on, witnessing Kayako coming down from the ceiling and taking her. That's pretty crazy. It leaves her catatonic in both films. until she wakes up in the hospital. Now, Sarah gets a little more investigative and curious, where it's a little less so with Rika because there's more stories going on around her. So they give it less time to actually happen on the film.
Yeah, there's so many other people who are being affected by it. So it's sort of like they're, like you say, they're kind of different chapters of the same story, and they're in different times. So.
Yeah, because there's so many characters in that first one, I do find that the emotional punch kind of suffers for it. And that's something Sarah Michelle Gellar got a little more time to play with in the American one.
I think the original one was more concerned with a lot of scares versus somebody having a through arc as a character.
Yeah.
It's more the story of the tragedy and how it unfolds itself on other people, but the people are kind of all incidental to the Grudge.
Mm-hmm. Like, I like its use of putting the character in the background to create the tension and scares rather than relying on a jump scare.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that slow creep towards the camera. You know it's going to come, and it's going to be staring out at the camera, or that eye in the book. These subtleties, the cat boys, the elevators going up from floor to floor, and there's this little window, and each floor it passes, you can see the cat boy again. It's like, fuck, you can move, man.
That creeped me out so much. Like, it's one of those things, like, yeah, like scares. The thought that it was just in my head where I'm like, he can go anywhere and he's just there. Like, that was really creepy. Like, your own brain fills in much better shit.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene through everything is that scene with the old man in the window when she's, on the phone.
The peekaboo
and then
guy.
He's saying, he's doing the peekaboo, and then they're walking, and the whole time you're kind of thinking, like, I don't know, what's up with this old man? But, then you see just for a second the reflection of the boy in the door. As it opens.
Yeah.
And, it was just so masterful.
I love how they
feel like none of the other movies kind of capture, the essence of that, which was, like, this masterful buildup of creep, Yeah,
I love that they brought him back for the American sequel for Grudge 2, where he's on the bus. Like, oh, that's the same dude doing the peekaboo, because he's kind of creepy in and of himself.
I was thinking about it while I was watching Ju-on, the Grudge, that's a scene in an American remake where I don't think it would have as much impact if it was an old person just going peekaboo, and that's exactly what we got in 2020, and I was right. It wasn't as creepy.
Well, the problem by going back to the same gag, it's like, well, okay, these are different characters, but you're pulling the same gag. If you keep doing that, of course they're going to lose a punch, because, I mean, you got to assume that at least 75-80% of that audience saw the last one. Mm-hmm. So why would you do it again?
Especially when it was done so well the first time.
I mean, yeah, and the 2020 even pulls the hand coming out of the head thing with John Cho. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, guys, we've done it. Like, and they do the bed gag again.
You know what? Legitimately, I think with the Grudge 2020, it feels like for me that somebody wrote a pretty generic, by the numbers 2010s haunted house movie, kind of in the vein of The Conjuring, but then it was looked at, and then they said, we should do a couple reshoots, and we could turn this into a Grudge movie. Yeah. Let's just add a couple Grudge elements. And that's kind of exactly what it feels like. It didn't really feel like it was connected to the Grudge, other than the references.
I felt like this was a way to pull it out of Japan by a character who was the former caretaker of that house, the former caregiver to the old lady with dementia, and then passes it on to Yoko, who goes missing and is pulled into the ceiling in the first Grudge movie, and then Sarah Michelle Gellar takes over that part. So this is somebody else who comes back to America and brings the curse with her and winds up murdering her own family as a result, which creates a new Grudge in that space, a new curse. And a large portion of that film isn't Kayako and the Catboy, although they are there. It is the mom and her daughter, a little bit of the husband as well, that are doing that haunting.
And it's weird watching it, especially right now, because it seems to be very allegorical to a lot of stuff. Like, you brought a curse back from a foreign country and you've infected other people.
Yeah, considering this came out just prior to the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, so it's and it does bring it back to like another space, but I love the idea. This is the one thing I really did like about the 2020 Grudge was it really drove home the fact that there is no outrunning this curse. It may have happened in that house, but once you're kind of marked, like a many hour plane ride will not save you.
Yeah, it brought it back home. The same murder happened through the Kayako influence for sure, and wind up cursing this space as well. So similar things are happening. We're seeing different people who lived in this space from past, present, etc. So you've got Detective Muldoon, who is investigating after finding a body and seeing these links back to her new partner, Goodman, who lost his partner, who got obsessed with this legend. He wouldn't even step in the house based on the stuff his partner, Wilson, was experiencing through investigation and stuff. So it really does follow a lot of the same beats, despite being different characters with different experiences. It still does feel like the same movie, and it didn't change enough for my tastes. I think it's still a fairly well executed one. It's just the same movie, and that's disappointing. And just gorier too.
It's disappointing, but I liked it. It was gorier. But I had a question. Should I say spoilers? Because I have a question.
Sure, yeah, because it is a pretty recent movie, so
spoilers. If you don't want to hear this, just maybe fast forward or something. When we're talking about, like, she burns down the house, and then in her own home, she's attacked. So do you think that this new home becomes the new impetus for, like, a new Grudge?
It's possible, but that home was cursed because of the events of Kayako. Kayako's still in Japan and is linked through this. So she was linked through these characters, and Muldoon stepped into that space. So she's still tied to the Grudge back in Japan, despite never having been there.
So do you think once they kill her, it's gone?
If that space is gone, so it's possible that that curse in that city, in that area, will peter out if that tragedy of that family homicide isn't recreated somewhere else. It could be, and who knows? We don't know if burning down the house does anything. That space could still retain that energy. That's something that they haven't really explored. I mean, they tried to burn down the house in Japan, and they wound up saving it, and it still stands and becomes local legend. But would it stop it? I don't know. Especially if it's perpetuated outside, and like if Kayako's not too quick on killing everybody, it could keep perpetuating.
Well, and then you have the realtor with his wife. I mean, there's some pretty nasty stuff that happens in their house.
Yeah, on that assisted suicide lady that started the whole investigation in the first place, where she's found in her car years later after her death. They find her body, and it just kind of revives this connection to the original murder that was investigated by Goodman. Yeah, they do wind up retaining that nonlinear way of storytelling. I don't think they changed it enough. They still, like I said, they used the bed gag and the hair gag. That's the problem. They weren't creative enough. You watch something like The Grudge 2, the sequel to the 2004, and the idea of, like, she can manifest in gaps, like, you know, there's, you can see her face in the hoodie in that second movie, and then just reaches from inside the hoodie and takes her, and then it falls to the ground. I'm like, that was awesome. So to be able to reuse those rules in different ways, that was an opportunity that I don't think they had enough imagination to utilize properly.
Well, see, I was fine with John Cho in the shower. I'm okay with that. That was a good enough change for me.
I do think
that made me happy.
I do think sometimes studios, I think we're going to see this more and more, where studios think that they can get by if they just take a couple scoops of gore and then lump it on their movie. I feel because Jay is right. There are some pretty good gore effects and stuff in the 2020 movie, but there's a lot of ways in which it's fairly lazy. And I feel like the gore is kind of something where it's like, do we just ignore some of the ways that it's lazy because, it's the first Grudge movie to really heap some more gore on top of it?
Well, I mean, if you utilize it in such a way, I mean, I guess with R ratings coming back, I could see why they wanted to do that. And I did find those scenes kind of benefited from being a bit, they didn't have to be gorier, But I did find, emotionally speaking, it affected me better. And there are times where I feel the opposite. We've talked about less is more a lot of the times on when we do horror episodes. So I just don't find the Grudge films build that sense of dread as well as something like The Ring does, where I wouldn't want to see as much gore. Whereas here, I'm like, I feel like there's room for it. You just didn't have the right screenwriter and a fairly young and inexperienced director here. Now I'm going to run the trailer here, and we'll get back and tell you a little bit more about Grudge 2020.
Hello, it's Peter Spencer. I'm here about selling the house. Is anyone home? Hello?
This is Detective Muldoon.
This is Peter Spencer. Something happened to me at 44 Rayburn Drive.
Someone was murdered at that house.
Why did you never go into that place?
Something never felt right about it.
Looks like we got another one.
Do you think that the body we found's related? Hello? I went to the house. Hello? Police department. I think something followed me home.
Mommy, what's going on? What's wrong?
We need to leave right now.
Okay, that was Grudge 2020 with the story by Jeff Bueller. He wrote Midnight Meat Train, the 2019 Jacob's Ladder, and the 2019 Pet Sematary.
Ooh.
We've got some sins to talk about because we haven't covered either one of those on this show yet. But yeah, Jeff.
But the 2019 Pet Sematary?
This does feel like this explains quite a bit.
Good.
Is it good?
2019 Pet Sematary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I wasn't a big fan, but
okay. Yeah, I've not heard those kind of reviews about that movie. But...
Oh, see, there's to me it's hinging all on the end, but we're getting sidetracked.
Yeah, we'll get there when we cover that film. Story, screenplay, and director was also Nicholas Pesce, or Peace. Sure, pick one. He directed a movie called Piercing in Eyes of My Mother, and he had like a music video, and he's got barely any credits, so he's a very young filmmaker who got himself a pretty good gig. This stars Tara Westward as Fiona. She was in Hellgirl. Junko Bailey as Kayako. So you've got a new person as Kayako, but Kayako's not in this very much, to be honest.
No.
David Lawrence Brown was Sam Landers, who had a recurring role on Burden of Truth on television. Zoe Fish was Melinda Landers. She was in the upcoming horror movie The Return, so you'll have to wait and see. Andrea Riseborough was Detective Muldoon. She was in Birdman, Oblivion, and the awesome Nicolas Cage movie Mandy, because she was Mandy.
Yes, she was Mandy. That's where I recognized her from.
Yeah, it took me a minute too, and when I looked her up, I'm like, oh, she's Mandy. Okay, I got it. John J. Hansen was Burke, her son. He was in Forgotten Hero. Damien Beecher was Goodman, and he was in Alien Covenant and Hateful Eight.
Nice.
Joe Marsh, Garland, was Detective Greco, and he was a series regular on Orange is the New Black. Bradley Sawatsky was Officer Michaels, and he was a regular on Channel Zero. Lynn Shay, a horror icon, was Faith Matheson, who cuts off her fingers in this movie, and she's regular in the Insidious franchise, and we did talk about her in a couple of episodes. First time was in episode 96. She was in The Running Man when we remade that movie, and of course episode 112 where we talk about Nightmare on Elm Street and its remake. John Cho was Peter Spencer, and believe it or not, we have actually talked about John Cho before, and that was in episode 84.
Oh gosh, I don't know that one.
Total Recall. He was in the Total Recall remake. Yeah.
See, all I remembered was I cast John Cho in the Kurt Russell role in Used Cars.
Ah, there you go. Well, we have used him in casting before. Big fan of William Sadler, who is Detective Wilson in this movie. Of course, most famous for Die Hard 2 and Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. Betty Gilpin was Nina Spencer. Everybody knows her from the hit Netflix series Glow. Jackie Weaver was Lorna Moody, and she was in the Netflix film Bird Box, which was a big hit for her. Frankie Faison was William Matheson, and I can't believe how many times we've actually got to talk about Frankie Faison. Oh boy. He was in episode 210 when we remade Maximum Overdrive. He was in both Manhunter and Red Dragon, which we covered in episode 99. He was in episode 137 when we covered Cat People and that remake. And he was also in Chud, which was episode 162 when we remade Chud. I was really shocked at how many times he's turned up in episodes we've covered.
He does a lot of work. He's working a lot, which is great.
Yeah, no, it is good. Now, what about, what were some of your favorite moments? There's some iconic things from both films. They become iconic because I guess we see them repeated many times. You get the hand coming out of the hair, the dragging the girl into the ceiling. I think a little less so with the jaw ripping. They kind of let that one go. I think they probably should have left that one in because it was one of the gorier things in those films, but for PG films. Seeing a jaw laying on the floor going, hey, who does that belong to?
Right?
Poor Yoko.
I know. And then she comes back, and then Buddy sees her, and jaw. She's got that tongue just coming out of her half face.
Oh, yeah. And Kayako seems to like the prank call.
Uh-huh.
It's something about these Japanese ghosts that like to do phone calls, but, she'll do her croaking on the phone and then impersonate one of the people that she's already killed that tie back to these characters. So,
the buzz me in.
The brother that buzzes me in, and then of course you figure they're outside of the building 9 floors down, and then the doorbell rings as soon as you haven't even hung up yet.
Right?
You look through the door and he's there. Like, what kind of game are you playing here? And then nobody's there, and then it turns out to be Yoko with no jaw in that remake. That was pretty cool.
Really? Was it her? I thought it was Kayako. Or no, she goes back into her bed and then gets pulled under.
Yeah, she hides in her bed, yeah. And then gets pulled under. But outside the door, before she slams it shut and hides under her bed, that was Yoko.
Yeah. No, it's kind of funny. Like, that's what I loved. To me, that gag I really enjoy because as a kid, where's the safe place? Under your covers. And that completely wrecks that whole idea for you.
Yeah, she can literally exist and work through any little gap. This reminds me of that old British saying of mind the gap. Like, really, do mind it. Look for the eyeballs. Look for the fingers popping out of places they shouldn't be popping out of. Like, I am staring suspiciously at my couch right now with the cushions. I'm like, what is in there? Like, is there a cat boy or worse? At least the cat boy doesn't kill too often. He just likes to freak people out.
Yeah, Catboy is great. I loved Catboy. And I didn't mind the remade girl in the one, but I wish she'd had a cat.
Did either of you watch The Grudge 3?
No.
No,
I didn't have time.
Oh, so in The Grudge 3, they also have Catboy, but it's like he's aged in real time in between The Grudge 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's just like painted white, but he's like 13 or something.
So
it does
he's
not
like
have the same
4 feet.
effect.
Did they cast they must have cast the same kid then.
They must have.
That was silly.
Yeah, it was really kind of hilarious. Like, it was the same looking face and everything, but like much older.
Yeah, the dead 5-year-old shouldn't look 14.
No. See, what you need to do with that is you just have to have people ignoring him thinking he's just gone emo. Oh, Toshio, go listen to The Cure. You're fine.
Apparently, in acting, there are no 5-year-olds willing to go through 2-hour makeup jobs.
I guess, yes. But yeah, a haunted child is still very effective.
Well, we all know how you feel about children. You're scared of them on a good day.
Exactly. If they're regular and normal, they're like, even with a regular and normal, it's scary. And then you add a ghost? No, thank you.
They're pale and wailing from cat noises.
Exactly. It's not good.
Imagine if you don't like children or cats. This is not your movie. This is definitely not the movie for you. It's funny, black cats in Japan are actually good luck for a house, but it has a different connotation here, so which works just as effectively, if not more so, because black cats in North America are supposed to be bad luck.
Although that's pretty sad.
Yeah, I love a black cat, but
I have 3 black cats.
Oh, that's not surprising of you, Jeff. You have a witchy household.
It's true. But black cats are actually, I think they're 1/3 less likely to get adopted than other cats, just because people think that they're either bad luck or not photogenic. So
underlying superstition, yeah.
They're super photogenic. I don't get that at all.
And also, if you have black, dark furniture, the hair doesn't really show up very much.
Yeah, and they're just, I don't know, they're just so cool. We had some black cats in each litter, like blackish. There were some white spots, but they were super fun.
Yeah, actually, the one scene where she woke up and then there's 1,000 cats.
Leah I was posted, so happy.
Leah posted that to her Instagram, and it was like, the Grudge accidentally showed me what heaven looks like.
Yes!
Okay, there's something from the 2004 film I want to bring up before I forget about it.
Okay.
Okay. It was Bill Pullman's wife, Maria, Rosa Blasi. Now, she's getting basically interviewed by Sarah Michelle Gellar, so finding out the connections about this stalking and stuff. Now, when she gets there, keep in mind, she's going to be talking about her husband, who is the only death that Kayako didn't cause because he committed suicide and tipped over his balcony and went splat. Now, when Sarah gets there, is it just me, or do I think she's ready for a date? It's like she's got this tight red dress on, lipstick. I'm like, are you heading somewhere?
She's in evening wear.
Yeah. I'm like, it's Jh. Who are you picking up from your apartment?
Yeah. I didn't get that either. I was sitting there going
this was not the right wardrobe for this scene.
No.
It felt so weird and out of place to me.
No, it made me wonder though, in the beginning when he actually kills himself by throwing himself off the balcony, she's just waking up in bed, her hair's a bit messy. Of course she's in full makeup because it's a movie, but I mean, they're estimating natural look. So maybe she's thinking oh my God, if I just gotten up early and done my makeup, he wouldn't have killed himself.
Yeah, so she's ready all the time now.
That's all I can really think about. That's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah, somewhere in the back of her mind going, oh, he really doesn't like bedhead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, if I just put on a bit of lipstick, all of this would be different.
He would have done a header.
Yeah.
The whole time I was watching it, and I was like, this is a national tragedy. The president just jumped off of a building.
Yes.
Oh, if only.
Oh, see, I kept thinking there's going to be a crossover with the Casper movie now.
I actually, as soon as I finished this, and I'm like, I kind of want to go watch his scenes from Scary Movie 4. I don't want to watch the whole movie. I just want to watch his scenes and see if they tie back directly to the Grudge, because I heard it was basically playing the same part. And that's kind of cool when somebody comes back and spoofs their own movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
this is actually a pretty small role for Bill Pullman, who's basically was the lead actor at this time.
He's William Hurt
in the credits.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like John Hurt at the end of Spaceballs with the chestburster.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, returning from Alien. Yeah, so which just legitimizes the joke more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they should have spoofed is the whole thing here with the Grudge is his character in Casper is a psychologist who's trying to help the ghosts in there cross over and like do their unfinished business. Where was that? Like, he should be going to Kayako like, what's keeping you here? I know you're obsessed with me, but this isn't going to work out.
Yeah, when she's like peering out of a sink or showing up in a doorway, it's like, okay, you need to knock that shit off. Yeah. People are misunderstanding you. Like, what can I do to help you move on from this? Terrible things happen to you. Let's release this rage. Like, I didn't like in the sequel where they tried to say, oh, her mother was a medium and literally feeding her dark spirits. Like, she would scoop out the darkness with her fingernail and like drop it in her daughter's mouth as if it was a physical thing. Neat idea, very Japanese idea, but at the same time, it's like, you're really unnecessarily piling on to the story, making it sound like she was evil before she was ever murdered. She was the victim of her story. Now you're saying she wasn't, and that bothered me, and I think that kind of derailed the American franchise for me.
Yeah, the whole like the remake bit, I don't know if I just wasn't paying enough attention, but like the whole obsessive love and like that's very strange to me. Like, she's in love with Bill Pullman, he doesn't love her. Her husband gets really mad because he kind of thinks that it's an affair, and sort of in essence he's loving her, but she doesn't really love him. It's a whole thing where like, yeah, somebody doesn't love you, get over it. It happens a lot. Just deal with it.
Yeah, when he went to confront Kayako at her home about all these love letters and stuff that she's been passive aggressively doing, and unfortunately he picked the wrong day because he picked Murder Day.
Yes, don't pick Murder Day. That's a bad day.
I mean, granted, most people don't know when Murder Day is happening, but
true. It's just like the worst surprise party.
It is. Surprise slip. Oh shit.
Yeah, Happy Murder Day.
Happy Murder Day. Oh, is that a t-shirt? Happy Murder Day? No.
Happy Murder Day.
I don't think we should put that one out now.
No. Well, it was weird. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm just reading too much into this, but like sort of in both movies, the husband, he goes so insane so quickly. It struck me as he was being possessed by something anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something the new TV series is delving into, which looks like it's kind of in this weird found footage documentary style. I haven't watched any of the new Netflix thing, but it's called Ju-on Origin, making it sound like something else had happened in this home prior to the Kayako murder of that family. So, yeah, there could have been something else there, and go watch the new series on Netflix and to find that out, because I don't know. But based on the trailer I saw, yeah, it's looking like something else happened there as well.
Wow. This is like the room 1408, but it's like a whole house.
I definitely think that probably, and I haven't seen reviews of either, but probably Ju-on Origins is better than the Grudge 2020. Just maybe. Putting it on a limb.
Let's get into some numbers here. Excuse my page flipping because I got 3 movies of notes here. The original film of 2002, like I said, this is a franchise of, 13 films?
Mm-hmm.
Some shorts. I think Jeff said there was a video game as well.
Yeah, for Nintendo Wii, actually. And I'm glad you brought this up.
Nice family-friendly game for Nintendo.
Yeah, no. So there's a game for Nintendo Wii called Ju-on Haunted House Simulator, and it's directed by the same director as Ju-on the Grudge and the American Remake.
Oh, Shimizu.
Yeah. So basically, with the Wiimote, that's your flashlight, and you like walk through a haunted house, and it takes about 2 hours to play. So it's like an interactive Grudge movie.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
Okay. I have questions. So when you're doing this...
There's no happy ending to that game, I'm sure.
I know. What's the goal?
Survive the ghosts, I guess.
But nobody ever does in the film, so
Yeah.
that if you actually survive, that kind of doesn't work within the lore of the films. You should actually be murdered no matter what.
I'm not sure how it plays out because I haven't played it all the way through. There is a 2-player option. I have it. I actually got it at Video Game Trader. That Jeff Invasion of the Remake Jeff Alpha owner of Video Game Trader. Yeah, I got it from him. And me and Leah were going to play 2-player, but with the 2-player, what happens is the other person has a Wiimote, and you can press, like, some buttons. And when you press the buttons, it, like, triggers something scary happening, but usually it's, like, an overlay on the screen or a sound effect. So you press a button, and it's like...
So your friend's
meow.
just trying to freak you out.
Yeah. You're, like, looking around, and it's like, meow, or, whoa. Yeah. And there's one where I think hair comes into the screen. It doesn't hurt you, it's just like, oh, that's annoying.
Yes, because Kayako and her annoying hair.
Yeah.
The movie's always portrayed her as annoying, not murderous.
Like, I'm always trying to look through my bangs anyway. Don't want to have to look through my bangs in a video game.
There's always hair everywhere. What's going on here? So annoying.
It was Sadeko versus Kayako. Was it all about their stylist going, I can't do anything with you two?
No, it's an interesting concept, though. It's weird because at a certain point, it feels like I'm watching a Japanese movie in the style of Robert Rodriguez, Once Upon a Time in the West. Mm-hmm. Because, like, halfway through, you've got, like, this super genius and then his, like, blind, psychic tween associate.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so the whole idea is that they both these two girls are to get both curses on each other.
Did they watch the videotape in Kayako's house?
Yes.
Okay.
One of them did.
I guess I should
have so effed.
Yeah, the whole point was to have the evil spirits fight over them and destroy each other. Like, there's a whole bit where, like, Sadako puts her hair into Kayako and, like, explodes her. But then there's a point where Kayako grabs the videotape and crushes it. But what ends up happening is, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, it's on Shudder. It's great. But you have the two characters, the two ghosts then just merge. They don't fight each other and then become a super ghost.
Oh. I guess I shouldn't be super surprised. I mean, both franchises were released through Toho in Japan, and they do love a good Godzilla meeting something. So this is a similar thing. Although I don't remember Godzilla merging with Ghidorah, so...
No. But you know what? It's I don't know. It's silly. It's good fun. I thought it was just good fun.
You know, and this is probably why we don't have, like, more Freddy versus Jason type movies, because they are kind of silly. Inherently silly. It's just like, well, now you got to make it about the ghosts instead of the characters that are usually affected by these monsters. Now you're putting the focus on them, and you don't give a shit about the victims at all because you want to see the fucking fight.
Yeah, and like I would have done more with the fight, but it's.
I mean, Jason versus Freddy is fun, but it's not a terribly good movie. But it's it's sure a fun one to experience.
You know,
it's silly as hell.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I think it's all about audience expectation sometimes, because I think you also get this with things like, you know, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and there's like a bunch of examples of some mashup movies where people automatically kind of have something in their head of what they would like to see on screen. But what it usually is when you take two different properties, whether it be Sadako and Kayako, or whether it be dark, brooding Zack Snyder Superman and what would that Batman look like, or whatever, it's more about the challenge of writing those characters' universes interacting with each other and what grows out of that in terms of a story. Kind of like more like a writing puzzle than like somebody trying to write a movie that's about two things fighting. But I think most people want something that's just two things fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens, like Batman v Superman, it seems like people were just trying to settle some sort of bet on what they think would happen. And then Sadako versus Kayako, what's really good is like their two worlds actually merge pretty easily. Because the overall environment is simply Japan, but the methods of which they curse people can coexist quite handily. So it does work well. Like, you don't have to do too many puzzle pieces for both of them and break many rules for it to actually work.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's like in theory, the Pred Alien and AVP.
Yeah, well, they did wind up doing some work to make those things merge in their continuity, so it works. Okay, so I was looking at the numbers, and it really was a miracle that this even continued past the 2002, but I guess because Raimi saw this movie and liked it and brought it to America, and the American success really probably perpetuated the Japanese side of things. The budget for the 2002 film was $3.5 million. It went on to gross in its domestic box office. Actually, our domestic box office. I don't know what the Japanese box office was, but it only did like $325,000 in North America. But the worldwide gross was 3.6-ish million. So it really just broke even as a film. But because it already had some background and in the short films and the direct-to-videos, that it was able to create at least a small cult audience for it. And you get to the Sam Raimi's remake, that's where the numbers really change. The budget for that movie was $10 million, but it had an opening weekend of nearly $40 million domestically, went on to gross in North America $110.3 million, and worldwide of $182 million. So it was a huge success in North America, and that probably perpetuated both franchises, to be honest, those kind of numbers. I imagine the original one started really doing well in rentals, both here and abroad, just because people wanted to see the source material.
Oh, for sure.
The more recent 2020 version still only had $10 million budget. Had an opening weekend of $11.4 million, so it made its money back in its opening weekend. Did wound up grossing only $21-ish million domestically, and was a worldwide gross of just shy of $50 million. Granted, it was a victim of the COVID theatrical shutdown as well, so it kind of got a premature movement to video. But you know what? $50 million on $10 million, that's not bad. Like,
it's still pretty good.
I know Jeff was thinking this would kill it, but I don't think it would. It might relegate it back to direct-to-video, though, with that kind of take. But it's certainly not a failure either, despite the critical lambasting. To be honest, none of these have done particularly well critically. I know Roger Ebert hated The Grudge.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert hated a lot of things.
He did.
He did.
Out of the two of them, though, I tended to agree with him more often than not, but this was a not.
I do think that this is something I was thinking I'd be interested in hearing what you guys think, is in the 2020 Grudge, I kind of feel like the treatment of ghosts was definitely a lot more Western than the treatment of the ghosts in the prior movies, even in terms of how they haunt in the depiction. Like, in the original Grudge movies, or in the earlier Grudge movies, I should say, there's kind of a sense of, you see the ghost and it's kind of coming after you, and usually it disappears because you've run away or, you've closed the door or something. But I feel like in the 2021, there was a lot of like ghosts just appearing and disappearing in front of people's eyes in ways that felt more like a lot of other modern horror movies I've seen.
You almost feel a little more comfortable with the 2020 because of the familiarity. I didn't really pinpoint it, but you might be right about that, where it's still using the Japanese tricks. I do feel like maybe its presentation was a little more geared towards American sensibilities of how hauntings work. We don't see the ghosts in the bright light of day all that often.
Well, and it goes completely west in a certain part of it, where you have Detective Muldoon, where she's just closing off the lights, turning stuff off in her place, and she's looking in the kitchen, and she sees something. She's like, crap! Turns on the light, it goes away, and that's like even just other light, just surrounding light makes it go away. So it's the light makes it go away, but in Japanese ones, like, it just shows up whenever it wants. It doesn't care about light.
They do a little bit more of a slow build to madness in that one, where it's like, it's almost like, well, Kayako will go in there and start messing with you a little bit, but make you doubting yourself because she's too busy with this it's like, okay, I gotta go murder this other person first, and then I'll come back to you.
Yes.
It does feel like there's a structure to her movement. It's like, well, okay, you're here on my schedule. I'll go peer through a door crack or something, and then I'll go murder this girl, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, like she can't be in two places at once, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in all of the other movies, too.
She's got a whole family that goes to do this, too.
Yeah. And there's a purveying sense, and we touched on this earlier, where there's a purveying sense because of the non-linear aspect of a lot of the storytelling, that the ghosts are just a presence that's around, that exists kind of outside of time. As Trish was saying earlier, I feel like in the 2021, even though you do jump around a lot, that also isn't something that you really feel a sense of. And I think that that's maybe one of the ways it didn't feel as much like a Grudge movie. It superficially on the surface was like a Grudge movie, but there was a lot of little things where for some reason they were doing the same thing, but it didn't have the same impact. You know?
Well,
Like,
I mean, and how
Mulder
could it,
Reed-
though? If you're familiar with it, how could it, like, if you're doing the same jokes, right? They're counting on their extra gore to get them there.
Because there's a lot of good concepts in the 2021.
There were.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about, okay, you have the one that has Sarah Michelle Gellar in it, and there's like that time loop, that time jump where she sees something happening in the past. In the 2020 Grudge, all it is she walks in the house, and the one woman says, like, I want to show you something. So it's not so much I'm going back in time to see this. It's really the Grudge ghost just telling her a story. So you don't do have that time thing.
You know, one other thing about the 2020 Grudge that I thought was just ridiculous is, even though I love William Sadler, when he was just like, that house, it's grudged. I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah, that was bad. That was just like, I hate when they try to merge the titles into the dialogue. It's like, yeah, I get it. It's just shut up.
Yeah.
Get it? You're watching The Grudge. He said the word grudge. There's a grudge there that's got a grudge against me. I'm like, yeah, that just makes it sound like you shat on their lawn or something.
If you're going to put a movie title into the movie, what I require is directly after you say the line, every single cast member looks down the barrel of the camera and just smiles and does a thumbs up. Because that's the only way I can swallow that.
That's funny. I just watched like what would have been an E3 video, and they ended it with everybody staring down the barrel of the camera with a thumbs up. So I think
God.
I think that's hilarious. Oh, yeah. Go watch the new Devolver video presentation. Theirs were always hilarious because theirs are they actually run them like they're sci-fi horror movies. But at the end, they're just smiling and staring down the barrel of the lens with a thumbs up, and I'm like,
that's so creepy.
That is hilarious that you actually mentioned that, because I just watched it yesterday.
Oh my god, it's creepy. We know each other's thoughts.
All right. Well, any last thoughts about The Grudge? I'm pretty sure this franchise is not going away anytime soon.
No.
I don't know how the American one will be back right away, but I think it will be back.
In hindsight, it's a very, very hard series to penetrate if you don't know anything about it. Like, it's really, really not obvious unless you look at a timeline of when they came out, what the series is. Like, when I was looking it up, I was like, wait a second. There's Ju-on 2 The Grudge and Ju-on 2 The Curse? Are those both sequels to Ju-on? No, there's Ju-on The Grudge. What? Ju-on The Curse? And I was like, there's two Ju-on 2s. It's like, oh, there's another Grudge. There's 3 Ju-on 2s. And if this 2021 gets a sequel, there'll be 4 Ju-on 2s. It was going down a bit of a mad rabbit hole. But yeah, just look at a timeline. It's much less confusing.
Well, we were just discussing how it doesn't exist in time, so maybe the timeline is kind of pointless.
Okay, here we go. I will give you the full timeline here. It started out as 2 shorts in 1998, part of a television anthology film called Gakko no Kaiden-ji, and the 2 shorts were Katsumi, and it's just 4444 if you want to find them. And then the 2 V Cinemas, that's what they call direct-to-video in Japan, V Cinema. Sounds way classier.
Yeah.
Ju-on The Curse from 2000. Actually, they were both shot like they both came out the same year. So it was Ju-on the Curse and then Ju-on the Curse 2. Then it went theatrical in 2002, which is the one we discussed, which kind of rejiggers all that material into a much more formed theatrical, and that was Ju-on the Grudge. And then 2003 saw its sequel, Ju-on the Grudge 2. Then the Americans get in there with their first remake, The Grudge, from 2004, which spawned its sequel in 2006, and utilizing the girls from the original film that were kind of cut and became part of the second film. And then 2009 was the American direct-to-video number 3. And by that point, they were ready to do some more in Japan, and there were 2 movies shot simultaneously called Ju-on Black Ghost and Ju-on White Ghost, which I do believe aren't Kayako films. They are separate stories of tragedies that create their own grudges, their own curses. So I don't think they tie back to the Kayako story at all, from my understanding. And then 2014 was the reboot film that Jeff mentioned called The Beginning of the End, and that reboots the Japanese franchise. And then 2015, Ju-on the Final Curse, but as we know, when they use the word Final Friday or the Final Nightmare, it never really is, because in 2016, Sadako from the Ring franchise goes in head-to-head with Kayako, and that was, you can find that on Shudder. And then, of course, the 2020 film, as well as the TV series that's currently on Netflix this year as well. There's some manga adaptations from Dark Horse. There's pretty much a novelization of every Japanese film for the most part. I think there's a couple that weren't. And they do mention the video game, which was called Ju-on the Grudge Haunted House Simulator, as Jeff said. So, yeah, no shortage of Ju-on material. But that is your timeline, folks.
Quite a lot to get into. And you know what? It's a series that I like. And as you're reading it out, especially with the final curse or the final grudge, then followed up by Sadako versus Kayako, if the grudge is Freddy or Jason and the ring is Freddy or Jason, which one is Freddy? Which franchise is Freddy? Which franchise is Jason? And why?
Are you asking us to choose which one would win the fight?
No, it's like if the Grudge franchise were to be either the Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th series.
Oh,
okay. Well, I always felt like there's more.
I know this one.
For me, my personal taste, there's more depth of story in The Ring, and I would say the same about Nightmare on Elm Street. So The Ring and Nightmare on Elm Street, I would put those together. I feel it's more about the kills and the body count for Friday the 13th, so I'm going to make that one The Grudge. Go ahead, Trish.
See, I came to the same conclusion, but for different reasons.
Okay.
What were your reasons?
Oh, my reasons are, so you have Nightmare on Elm Street is dreams. It's an altered state. So having like a videotape, The Ring, like it's sort of another dimensional part. So that's how I feel that Sadako is more like Freddy. And then with Kayako, it's like it's a place, it's a space where she does her best work, which is Jason in a camp.
Nice.
Well, how would you do it, Jeff?
I would agree I would agree with the placement. I think that definitely, like The Ring, it's a lot more like Nightmare on Elm Street, just because there's a sense of another dreamlike world, kind of like what Trish was talking about. Yeah. It's kind of like something visceral about, when you go to sleep, what happens. And when you put in a VCR, what happens. And traditionally, that's not something that's challenged other than, like to your personal health. In both ways, I guess those are kind of similar. And yeah, with The Grudge, similarly, it's like a curse. It's like something bad that happened to one person who then carries out bad things to everybody else going forward. Like with Jason, he's drowned as a kid, and then that like manifests itself as, this unstoppable killer who just returns to kill the people who were involved in, or similar to the people who killed him.
Yeah, well, and Sadeko Sumara, depending on the film, was unrepentingly evil even before her death, much like Freddy. So,
definitely.
Whereas Jason and Kayako are both tragic characters.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting how many parallels there are.
There really are.
Jeff just did the movie version of If You Were a Tree.
It's interesting, though. It's like a parallel thinking a little bit. I mean, even though the timeline is a little bit more forward, it's like 2000, like 90s, 2000s instead of the 80s.
I guess this would technically be Japan's Jason and Freddy.
Yeah.
So, not a bad question.
It's true. It's a good question. And I mean, the whole point is, too, is it's how these westernized ideas translate to an Eastern mindset. Like, a Jason would be a little different in how they tormented their victims, and so would a Freddy.
I wonder if it's like psychologically there's something about someone who is an evil spirit, who's evil from the start, versus a spirit who was wronged and is tragically carrying out the murder. And there's something psychologically about how both of those concepts are kind of on the opposite end of a spectrum, so we want to see them come together and reconcile which one would come on top.
Okay, well, which other J-horrors would you like us to do? I can think of a few. There's The Eye, Darkwater, Shudder, and so many more. So let us know which you would like us to do on our social media, at Invasion Remake on Twitter, Invasion the Remake on Facebook and Instagram, and Invasion the Remake at gmail.com. Email us if you want to just chat with us, make some suggestions, your corrections, your comments, and fan challenges for things to remake if you would like us to do so. And of course, spread the word of the Invasion to friend and foe. You can find us at our host site on Wixsite. That's links on our social media. And we're also, of course, invasiontheremake.libsyn.com. We have a new TeePublic Store. We're still working on some new designs to get up there, but there's quite a few designs up there already. You can get masks, t-shirts, mugs, pillows, etc. And we get a portion of those sales come back to us and help support the show that way. And guess what? Next week is going to be our big 250th episode.
Woohoo!
Wow.
Yeah. So we'll do something fun that is one of our little dream projects that we probably wouldn't want to see done, but it'll be fun for us to do regardless. And I actually gave everybody, I picked 3 films for our 250th episode and gave everybody a choice, and out of the 4 of us, well, I mean, I came up with the movies, and then I asked Sam and Trish and Jeff, and every one of them picked a different movie. So,
because we're like that.
So we might make that the next 3 weeks, and you'll get to see all of the picks all at once. Over the next 3 weeks. Only one can be 250.
Halfway there.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but it's going to be a fun one for us. So make sure you tune in next week for episode 250 of Invasion of the Remake. Man, we're getting into Marin years here.
We are. I was going to also request another thing, too. If people want to flip the Freddy versus Jason, Ring versus Grudge, and have reasons for it, I would be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, which one's
definitely.
Which one's Godzilla, which one's Ghidorah, or pick your franchise, which one's Frankenstein, which one's Dracula. We would love you to equate these to some classic pairings and let us know your reasons why. That would be a lot of fun. I would love to see that. Yeah. So, hit us back on our social media of those as well. And this kind of became more of an overview of the franchise because there's so much of it, and it kind of gets little bits and pieces get used all over the place. And I think the biggest sin of this franchise is when they wind up reusing the gags. When it leaves the hands of its original creator, and all they can do is recreate the same scenes over and over again. I guess a monster needs a signature kill. Kayako's got her hand coming out of a person's head during the shower. It'd be more fun if it was a bald guy. But I guess she needs those gaps, right? She needs the space between the hairs to do that.
Ooh, not a bald. Well, a bald guy but like with a very furry torso.
Oh, I'm coming out of back hair.
Yeah.
That would be funny. Or coming out of a bathrobe. I don't know. They have done some cool stuff. The thing with the hoodie in the second movie was awesome. It was really good. It just too bad it wasn't a better movie.
You know what? It is possible. Like even in The Possession, which Sam Raimi also produced, there's a scene where somebody is like has something in their throat and they're looking in the mirror, and then some fingers come out from the back of their throat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of stuff you can do with that concept. So you're like, it is actually a little surprising how little they play around with it.
Yeah, I mean, just take a look at around your own home and all the little spaces that seem innocent enough that something can crawl out of. A finger, an eye, and yeah, good luck sleeping tonight.
I'm going to be taping my closet, I think.
Oh.
I did that in both movies. It seemed to kind of work.
Yes, well, apparently the cat boy who can jump from floor to floor cannot get past duct tape.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe the rules are if it can keep out a cat, it can also keep out a cat boy.
Ooh. But it's hard to keep cats out.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to keep Catboy out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, until next week, I've been Jason. He's always Sam.
I continue to be Trish.
And I've been Jeff Omega.
And we are out of here.